Well, now the plan is not so much to take Bobby's place. I think yes, you're right in saying that it's progressing and the role is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, in the projected scripts, it's coming along really great.
Did you know that the AIDS epidemic quietly wiped out an entire generation of television's most beloved performers? Behind the laughter, behind the studio lights, dozens of sitcom stars were fighting a terrifying battle in silence. Some hid it to protect their careers, some hid it to protect their families, and some never got the chance to tell their truth at all. From the dad everyone wanted to the puppet master who made the world laugh, here are 20 sitcom stars who died of AIDS. 1. Robert Reed, footage search https:/www.youtube.com/results, search _query for Robert plus Reed plus Brady plus Bunch plus interview. If you grew up watching TV in the 70s, Robert Reed was the dad everyone wanted. As Mike Brady on the Brady Bunch, he was calm, wise, and unshakable. But behind that picture-perfect image, Robert was living in constant fear. He was a gay man in an era when that truth alone could destroy a career, especially for a man playing America's ideal father. He hated the silly scripts and clashed constantly with the show's creator, but he stayed because the cast had become his real family. Then in 1991, everything collapsed at once. He was diagnosed with colon cancer. And when doctors ran further tests, they discovered he was also HIV positive. His co-star Barry Williams later revealed that Robert refused to go public because he knew it would shatter the wholesome image the Brady family stood for. He died in May 1992 at 59. He protected his TV family until the very end, never letting them see how much he was carrying. 2. Michael Jeter, footage search https:/www.youtube.com/results, search plus shade scene. Michael Jeter was the kind of performer who could make an entire room erupt just by walking through a door. On Evening Shade, he played the unpredictable Herman Styles, a performance so electric it earned him an Emmy. He seemed like he was made of pure joy. But in 1996, Michael did something that took real courage. He went public with his HIV diagnosis at a time when Hollywood was still treating the virus like a death sentence and a career-ending secret. He said he was tired of the whispers and wanted to show the world you could still live fully with the diagnosis. He kept working, landing major film roles, including The Green Mile. But the battle was wearing him down. In 2003, he was found in his Hollywood home. The official cause of death was an epileptic seizure, but it was the long complications from HIV that had weakened his body. He was 50 years old. He had chosen bravery over silence, and the industry never gave him enough credit for it. 3. Tom Villard, footage search https:/www.youtube.com/results, search plus made. Tom Villard was everywhere in the 80s. Bright smile, sharp timing, the kind of face that belonged on a sitcom. He starred in We Got It Made and had a career that seemed built to last. Then fans noticed something changing. He was thinner. His energy was fading. The rumors started moving through Hollywood the way they always did back then, quiet and cruel. Instead of hiding, Tom walked onto a talk show in 1994 and told the truth. He talked about what it was like to be refused insurance, to be treated differently, to be avoided. He wanted to put a real face on the disease and strip the fear away from it. Months later, he was gone. Pneumonia, a common and devastating complication for those with a compromised immune system, took him at just 40 years old. He was one of the first of his generation to be that open, paving the road for others who came after him. 4. Doc Rambo, footage search https:/www.youtube.com/results, search _query Rambo plus Dallas plus actor plus interview. Doc Rambo had a name that sounded like a movie character and looks that matched. He played Jack Ewing on Dallas, the handsome bad boy audiences loved to watch. His career was at its peak. Then in 1991, he tested positive for HIV. What happened next was a textbook Hollywood horror story. According to Rambo, once the producers learned of his diagnosis, his character quietly began to disappear from the storyline. He believed he was being pushed out because of the stigma attached to the virus. He eventually walked away from the show and chose to speak out, calling the industry hypocritical and cowardly. He spent his final years advocating for those who were sick and fighting the culture of fear that had ended his career. He died in March 1994 at 52. He was furious right up until the end, and his anger was completely justified. 5. Merritt Butrich. Footage search. https://www.youtube.com/results. Search_query plus Butrich plus square plus pegs plus star plus trek. Merritt Butrich had a rare kind of intensity. Sci-fi fans knew him as David Marcus, Captain Kirk's son in the Star Trek films. Sitcom fans knew him as the quirky, unforgettable Johnny Slash on Square Pegs. He had a strange, brilliant energy that made you watch him even when he wasn't the center of a scene. But he was intensely private about his personal life. When he began getting sick in the late 1980s, he kept it hidden entirely. Those who worked with him noticed he was fading, but he stayed professional until he could not anymore. He died in March 1989 at the age of 29. Pneumonia driven by the underlying HIV infection took him before most of his fans even knew anything was wrong. He was just getting started. His death was quiet but devastating to those who understood how much he had left to give. 6. Leonard Frey. Leonard Frey was the kind of actor other actors studied. He received an Academy Award nomination for Fiddler on the Roof and brought that same sharp, layered craft to his sitcom appearances, including The Best of the West and guest spots on The Mary Tyler Moore Show. His dry wit and distinctive delivery were completely his own, but by the mid-1980s, the New York theater world Leonard belonged to was being devastated. Friends were dying around him. When his own diagnosis came, it landed on a man who had already watched the epidemic swallow his community whole. He kept working as long as his body allowed. He died in August 1988 in New York City at 49. He was a brilliant performer in every form, stage, screen, and comedy, and the epidemic robbed him before his best work was done. 7. Steve Tracy. Little House on the Prairie fans remember Steve Tracy as Percival Dalton, the only man who could tame the fearsome Nellie Oleson. The chemistry between him and actress Alison Arngrim was completely real, because off-screen they were best friends. What the audience never knew was that Steve was quietly battling HIV during his time on the show. In the mid-1980s, coming out with that diagnosis was a career-ending move, and Steve knew it. He confided in Alison and a few close friends, but kept it from the public. She was by his side as he declined. He died in November 1986 at just 30 years old. After his death, Alison Arngrim became one of the most visible AIDS activists in Hollywood. She said she did it for Steve. His legacy did not die with him. It became a movement. 8. Brad Davis. Brad Davis was raw, physical, explosive on screen. He became famous playing the tortured Billy Hayes in Midnight Express and appeared in the landmark miniseries Roots. He played men who were tough, dangerous, and magnetic, which is exactly why his diagnosis in 1985 terrified him so deeply. He was convinced that Hollywood would see HIV as a liability and shut him out completely. So he and his wife constructed an elaborate system of secrecy, fake names at hospitals, cash payments for medication so there would be no paper trail. He performed and worked in constant fear of exposure. He managed to keep the secret until he died in September 1991 at 41. Only after his death did his wife go public with the truth, revealing the extreme lengths he had been forced to go to just to keep working. It was one of the most heartbreaking portraits of what fear did to talented people during those years. 9. Keith Christopher. Keith Christopher was an actor and musician with a rock and roll edge. He made his mark on the daytime soap Another World and appeared in sitcoms including Murphy Brown. He was known for his striking looks and the raw energy he brought to every scene. He was not someone who chased mainstream celebrity. He was an artist who cared about the work. When he received his diagnosis, Keith did not retreat from that work. He kept creating, kept performing, kept showing up. Some of those who worked closely with him said the illness seemed to sharpen rather than dull his performances. because he was living the vulnerability he was putting on screen every day. There was nothing false in what he was giving. He died in 1998. He was a working artist until the very end, and his story is proof that the epidemic did not only take the famous. It took the dedicated, the talented, and the hard-working just the same. People who gave everything to their craft and never got the credit they deserved. 10. Wayland Flowers. He was the man behind Madame, the sharp-tongued, outrageous puppet who could say things no human character on television could get away with. Together they had their own sitcom, Madame's Place, and were regulars across the comedy circuit. Wayland was openly gay and a beloved fixture in the entertainment world, but during a performance in the late 1980s, he collapsed on stage in front of his audience. It was the first visible sign that something was seriously wrong. He had been battling HIV privately, but his body was failing fast. He died in October 1988 at 48. After his death, Madame was retired for years. No one else could voice her. No one else was Wayland. The epidemic didn't just take a performer. It silenced something truly original that could never be replicated. 11. Richard Hunt. You almost certainly know his characters, even if you never learned his name. Richard Hunt was the voice and hands behind Scooter, Beaker, and Statler in The Muppets and performed regularly on Sesame Street. He was loud, anarchic, and absolutely essential to the energy of those productions. On set, he was known for his enormous personality and his ability to make everyone around him laugh. But in the early 1990s, the Muppet family was hit twice. First, Jim Henson died. Then, Richard got sick. He had known about his HIV diagnosis for some time, but kept working to bring joy to children. He died in January 1992 at just 40 years old, only 2 years after losing Henson. The characters he voiced had to be recast, but fans who grew up watching the originals always said something was different. His manic, irreplaceable energy was gone, and the epidemic had taken it. 12. Larry Riley. Larry Riley was a trailblazer. He played Frank Williams on Knots Landing, a primetime soap opera that millions of Americans watched every week. His character was a singer and a deeply human presence on the show, and Larry was a pioneer for black actors in primetime drama. But in his final season, viewers noticed something. He looked different. He was visibly losing weight. The producers tried to conceal it through wardrobe and camera angles, but it was undeniable to fans who had been watching him for years. He died in 1992 from kidney failure directly caused by HIV complications. He was only 39 years old. He had been reaching the peak of his career when the disease took him. His departure from the show was abrupt, and the hole he left was never properly filled. His story is one of the most overlooked tragedies of that entire era. 13. Gene Anthony Ray. Gene Anthony Ray did not just play a dancer. He was a dancer, raw and completely self-taught, pulled off the streets of New York to star in the movie Fame and the television series that followed. As Leroy Johnson, he was electric, the kind of performer you could not take your eyes off even for a second. But after Fame ended, his life became increasingly chaotic. Work dried up. Rumors of substance issues followed him. And then the HIV diagnosis came. He spent his final years in near total obscurity, far removed from the days when his face was on posters across America. He suffered a stroke related to his condition and died in November 2003 at 41 years old. The man who danced to a song about living forever died almost completely forgotten. That cruelty is impossible to ignore. 14. Ray Sharkey. Ray Sharkey had the kind of dangerous charisma that made Hollywood sit up straight. He became famous on Wiz-A-Guy, playing the kind of street-smart, menacing character that audiences found impossible to look away from. He was on the path to becoming a serious leading man. But off-screen, Ray had a lifestyle that was spiraling. Severe substance abuse had been a problem for years. When he was diagnosed with HIV in the late 1980s, he refused to accept it. He stayed in denial. He kept working, delivering intense performances even as he was visibly deteriorating. By the time he died in June 1993 at 40 years old, he weighed under 90 pounds. The physical transformation from the man on screen to the man who died was horrifying to those who had known him. His story is a tragedy built on talent, addiction, and a wall of denial that he never broke through. 15. Timothy Patrick Murphy. Timothy Patrick Murphy was the definition of all-American. Blue eyes, blonde hair, a disarming smile. He played Mickey Trotter on Dallas and was a frequent guest on shows like The Love Boat. Audiences trusted him immediately. He had the kind of looks and warmth that made him a natural leading man. But Timothy was deeply private about who he was, because in the 1980s, being open about his orientation would have ended the career he had worked so hard to build. When he got sick, he retreated from the public completely. He wanted to be remembered the way his fans had seen him, healthy and full of life, not as someone the industry would pity or fear. He died in December 1988 at just 29 years old. He was another young man who had to hide who he was and died before the world would ever fully let him be himself. 16. David Rounds. David Rounds was not a household name, but if you watched television in the 1970s and early 1980s, you saw his face regularly. He was a working actor, the kind who makes every scene feel populated and real. He appeared in The Jeffersons and various classic sitcoms, and he was a respected veteran of the Broadway stage. He spent his life as part of the infrastructure of American entertainment, one of the performers the industry depends on and rarely celebrates. Like so many in that world, the epidemic found him. He died in 1983 at the age of 41. His death came in the very early years of the crisis, before treatments existed, before anyone fully understood what was happening, before there was even a common language for the disease. He was one of the first wave, a reminder that the virus did not care about talent or career or how much someone still had left to give. His passing is a small marker and a much larger tragedy that swallowed thousands of people the entertainment world has never fully mourned. 17. Robert Christian. Robert Christian made history. He was the first black actor to hold a regular role on the daytime soap opera Another World, breaking a barrier that had stood for far too long. He also appeared on The Cosby Show, bringing his dignified and powerful presence to every role he took. He commanded attention with his voice alone. But Robert was fighting a silent battle during the early and most terrifying years of the epidemic, when almost nothing was understood about the disease and fear was the only response most people had. He died in 1983 at 43 years old, one of the earliest casualties. His death was a wake-up call to the New York acting community that something catastrophic was spreading through their world. He opened doors for others and never got to see the full weight of what he had done. 18. Mark Stevens. Mark Stevens belonged to the old Hollywood school where privacy was not just preferred, it was sacred. He had been working in film and television since the 1940s and accumulated decades of steady, respected work. He appeared in various television productions through the 1970s and 1980s as a reliable character actor. When his health began to fail in the early 1990s, he made a decision that felt very much in keeping with who he was. He moved to Spain to live out his final years far from the prying eyes of the entertainment press. He died in 1994 at 73. His official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but it was widely understood within the industry that complications from HIV were the real story. He took his secrets with him entirely, which was his right, but the silence also meant that for years his story went untold. 19. Frank Parker. He spent decades on Days of Our Lives and built a career as a warm, trustworthy presence on American daytime television. He made it through the 1980s and 1990s, through the years when so many around him did not. But survival came at a cost. Living with HIV for decades took a serious toll on his body, and reports surfaced that his later years were marked by dementia and Parkinson's-like symptoms that can be worsened by the long-term effects of the virus. He died in 2018. His story is not one of being robbed too young, but of carrying something heavy for an entire lifetime. He represented all the survivors who did not die in the crisis, but still bore its marks every single day. 20. Irving Metzman. Irving Metzman was the kind of actor every production needs. He was not a star. He was the nervous guy in the background, the minor antagonist, the character who made scenes feel lived in and real. He appeared in movies like War Games and had guest spots on sitcoms, including Family Ties. He was working steadily through the 1980s, a familiar face if not a famous name, and then he simply disappeared from screens. No fanfare, no announcement. He had fallen ill. He died in 1994. Like so many working actors of his generation, his departure from Hollywood was quiet and unremarked upon. He was one of the thousands of supporting players whose loss thinned out the world of American television in ways that most audiences never fully registered. But he was there. He mattered. And he deserved to be remembered.